Let me tell you about a day that started as a normal day but quickly turned into one of the most abnormal days that I believe I've ever had. I was at a meeting at the hospital where I used to work. I was probably the lowest pay grade in the room. Everybody else there was probably a director or a vice president or something like that. But when someone said meeting adjourned, we all stood up, and my skirt fell off all the way to the floor. Now, no one else seemed to hear a thing, but to me it made the loudest possible thundering noise. And I called all kinds of attention to myself by saying something like, "Ah!" And I grabbed my skirt up and I jumped back in my chair and I threw it in my lap, and I commenced to laughing so hard that I could not do a thing. I was a total limp noodle. Now, the man that was sitting on one side of me during this meeting was the ER director, and he also happened to be in my Sunday school class. And he did a really sweet thing and just left the room. And the man sitting on the other side of me was my boss, and he's known me all my life. He's really like my big brother. And he also did a really sweet thing and just left the room. But my good friend Carol across the room, who was the director of nursing, screamed out loud, "I got your back, sister!" And she ran all the way around the room, and she stood hunched over me like this to try to protect me from everyone else's stares. Pretty soon, some women started gathering around me, and they were saying nice things like, "You really ought to put your skirt back on." And I knew I should, but I just couldn't. I was laughing too hard. But eventually I was able to gather my skirt around me. Now I began to think, you know what? This should be the most embarrassing moment of my whole life. I should be mortified. I should be in tears. I should crawl under this table and cry until all these people leave the room. Then I should slink across the street to Human Resources and resign my job and go home and never come out again. But I just couldn't quit laughing long enough to do any of that. Now, my friend Mark, that was sitting on one side of me, came out of the back, and he sort of put his arm around me and patted me and snickered a little bit, and then he left. And my boss, Daryl, came out from the bathroom, and while he was in there washing his hands, he was laughing himself so hard that he spilt water all down the front of his pants. So now they had something else to laugh at besides me. Well, the whole situation settled down, and I began to think about who might have seen that whole episode, especially of the male gender. So I saw my boss's boss, who was a younger guy, really kind of like my little brother, and I said, "Jim, did you see?" And he said, "See what?" And I said, "Never mind." And then I saw Scott, who was the director of food service. Now, Scott's a practical joker, and my employees were telling me, "Oh, if Scott saw that, you are never going to hear the end of it." So I said, "Scott, were you there?" And Scott said, "Yeah, you know, I'd never seen anything like that, so I just left." And I got to thinking, well, that's real nice of Scott, but what does he mean he had never seen anything like that? Then I saw my friend Paul. I said, "Paul, did you see?" And Paul said, "Yeah, I did see. Do you want to know what I was thinking?" And I said, "Not really." Now let me stop there a minute and tell you. Two things. One is I always get asked how this happened. Well, it was a denim wrap skirt, and I had put it on that morning, and I had buttoned it on one side, and the button was missing on the other side. So being the desperate housewife that I am, I got a big old safety pin and pinned it. Only I didn't do a very good job because the pin obviously worked itself loose and the whole skirt fell off. Second thing people ask me is, was I wearing a slip? Well, no, I wasn't wearing a slip. And besides that, it's a denim skirt. Why do women wear slips with denim skirts anyway? So no slip. But here's one good thing that happened that day, and I give God all the credit for this, because when I reached into my underwear drawer that morning, he caused me to pick the one pair of underwear that I own that have legs in them. So back to Paul. Paul said, "Do you want to know what I thought?" And I said, "Not really." And he said, "Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. I was wondering, why did she wear shorts to work?" Now, ladies, let this be an admonition to you. This is why I recommend you do not wear thong underwear, because your skirt could fall off. Now, I got back to my office a couple of hours after this incident happened, and there was a voicemail from my pastor's wife, who is also my dearest friend. And she said, "Dear, I hear you might need pastoral counseling because you're having trouble with disrobing in public." So I called her and I said, "Where did you hear this?" 'This?" And she said, "Walmart." Now, This was a totally normal day at the beginning. It quickly turned into a really abnormal day. It should have been the most embarrassing day of my life. But somewhere in the process, I decided it was just way more fun to laugh.